All right, good morning and welcome to the SitRep for today, which is the 1st of August 2022. Made it through July. Kicking on into this year, getting through it. I hope you're all well, wherever you are in the world. I am currently in a hotel room in Stockholm, in partway through my journey home, back to the motherland. Not to the motherland, to Australia, call it the motherland if I want. Why not? Lots of stuff going on. Lots of stuff going on. I hope you're all well. I hope things are going well in Australia. By the sounds of it, everything is pretty good. But lots of news to get into today. So let's jump into it without any further ado. China defends warship visit to Sri Lanka after India issues protest. So China's been quite active in the seas of late, probably for good reason, that they kind of pushing back against the US. So the US classically has the absolute dominance over the seas. There is nobody who even comes close to what the naval might of the US. So it's very interesting now that China is actually starting to push into this space and swing it around a little bit. Obviously, we're getting tied into this, the Pelosi visit to Taiwan, or non-Pelosi visit to Taiwan, actually, which is interesting news that came out overnight, where Pelosi started putting out where she's actually going on this tour. And interestingly enough, Taiwan's not on the list. And when sort of queried about it, they just don't answer. It's just not on the list and they're not answering it. So they're not saying anything about it right now. China's put some warnings out and it looks like US has backed down. Whether she actually goes into Taiwan, she was pretty adamant that she was going to go to Taiwan, but whether she does or not is yet to be seen. Good morning, Steve Richards 66 on Instagram. Whether she does or not remains to be seen. I personally don't think she will. I reckon she's been warned out by the US intelligence agencies and Defense Department to say, not a great idea right now. Let's not do this. But again, this shows a big sign to the world that the US no longer can hold its own power. It can no longer extend that power into the world and do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is totally up to you. But it is a signal that the US at the moment has points of weaknesses and can be actually forced to do things that it might not want to. Interesting times. But this story here was on China-India, which was quite interesting. So Sri Lanka is obviously in collapse, as you should probably know if you've ever listened to me before. I talk about Sri Lanka nonstop going into collapse. So their country, the technical term for it is fucked. They are fucked. They have pretty much run out of money. IMF has said they're probably not going to come in and help them out. So it's up to other countries to do it. Russia's doing some deals there to try and get some fuel into that country. And China, unsurprisingly, is seeing blood in the water and is sinking its claws into Sri Lanka right now. So they're there under the guise of helping out. China does things for China's sake. That's all I'm going to say. That's one thing that I will say, whether you like the US policies, foreign policies or not, the US has done a lot of things and made a lot of sacrifices within its own country in order to secure other parts of the world. And I'm not talking about the wars that it's fought, just in general, what it's actually done. The US could have, post-World War II, created an empire, but it didn't. It didn't create an empire. It instead secured parts of the world. And secured, things like international shipping, for example. So China, I don't believe, has that intention. China would not, from just judging on what they've done in the past, would not really even consider becoming the world police in the way that the US had or has been. So when China is stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to help out this poor struggling country, I'm like, yeah, right. Like, what are you guys going to do to it? So anyway, they sent ships down to Sri Lanka. They said, yeah, we're going to help you out. Here's some money. We're going to sort this out. By the way, all we need is just some ships down there. So we're going to send some of our naval ships down there. Obviously, India is like very close with Sri Lanka, and India is not on good terms with China. So they're like, whoa, this is not cool. This is not cool at all. Really interesting stuff going on in that space there. Again, another friction point that we don't hear about a lot because of the Ukraine, miasma of information, that India and China are actually at each other's throats as well on any given day. Another one of those flashpoints that I always talk about. And I think I'm going to talk about another one too in a second. Okay, so obviously we're going through regions. What I'm trying to do is regionalize this information as I put it out now. So there was nothing significant that I saw in Pacific region. So I've jumped up to, or Southeast region, Southeast Asia. So I've jumped up to East Asia now, moving over to the Middle East. That sort of East Asia subcontinent, Middle Asia type area. Now I'm going to shift over to the Middle East. A couple of interesting stories have jumped out there. Baghdad again is protesting. So we're seeing protests around their parliament buildings for the second time this week. Quite large protests there. Not an uncommon occurrence within Baghdad, to be honest, but just interesting to watch that these protests, how they're starting to spread out throughout the world. So that's what we're actually seeing. Saudi Arabia is starting to do some deals with Russia. So the Saudi energy minister meets Russian deputy PM Novak. Saudi Arabia's energy minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman met with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak on Friday. So they're talking about a development of a joint Saudi-Russian committee, which is sort of like furthering the partnership, I guess, that is already extant there, or is already there with OPEC Plus. But this is going above and beyond OPEC Plus. This is really connecting in these two countries here. And this is, I'm sure, another massive metaphorical kick in the dick to the US, who, like, the Saudi Arabian US tie has been strong for 50 years now, or on and off for 50 years. But that's the big draw card. That's where the oil is. That's the petrodollar nexus, is Saudi Arabia and the US. So the fact that Saudi Arabia is getting into bed with Russia a little bit, I think there'll be some US people who are sweating bullets over this sort of information. Interesting to see the way the world's playing out, though, at the moment, that we're clearly seeing the not the destruction, but the shifting away from the petrodollar. So we've been in a system of finance, of economy, built around the petrodollar, the US dollar, petrol coming out of all kinds of places, but Middle East being one of the bigger producers, not the biggest, but the bigger producers. And that's really held the economy in lock for a long time, and we're seeing that unlock now and shift. And where it's going to turn out, we don't know, but we're starting to see things form there. So it's going to be an interesting thing. In many ways, we're going backwards. We're regressing as far as economic power goes. Okay, we jump over to the EU now. So the EU is prepares the public for winter gas siege, which is really strong language, a gas siege. So essentially what's happening here is the governments of the EU are starting to gear their public. They're using their propaganda machine to say, like, Russia has weaponized food, has weaponized gas. They're going to use it against us come winter. They're going to shut it off and we're all going to freeze. Nothing about their poor policies, nothing about their poor economic spending, their fiscal spending or anything like that. All these sorts of things are forgotten about because it's all Putin's fault, right? Nothing talking about how they got in that place in the first instance, that there was an opportunity, there was clear opportunities in the past 20 years for them to diversify where they get their energy from throughout Europe. And they started to go down there, and they started to go a little bit of nuclear, and they've been pushing into this green space, but very much, especially countries like Germany, very, very much looked at the easy option, saw where the dollars were, saw how dollars could fall into their pockets, and went, bang, let's do that. Let's go the easy option here. And that's what they've done. And now they find themselves in this situation. But at least they can sit there and blame it on Putin, and most of the public will probably sit there and go, "Oh yeah, Putin, yeah, it's his fault," like idiots. But this is something that's concerning. So, for those who don't know, I've been over here in Sweden doing a course or a couple of courses, one in forging, one in traditional timber frame building. The last course I did, a great bunch of people, like just awesome human beings. I've made some friends on that course that I think I'll probably stay in contact with for the rest of my life. But all people from everywhere. So there was Swedish people, obviously. There was German people. There was French. There was English people. People from all over the shop. But I kind of got to talk to people and get the feel of what they feel is happening in Europe at the moment. And it was very interesting talking to the German people. They're very cognizant of the fact that they're going to have a problem come winter, that they're having problems now, but they're going to have a huge problem come winter. So they're looking down the barrel of this, and they're pretty aware of what's going to happen. Steve Richards says, "Love the Damascus blade you posted earlier." Yeah, that's a beautiful blade. I wish I had bought it, but I didn't. That was actually me and a top brother from another mother, who's a Swedish dude. That was actually me and a top brother from another mother, who's a Swedish dude. We just went crazy and bought a bunch of axes and knives and stuff like that. So we laid them all out. And so half those things that you saw in that video on that post were mine. The other half is his. That knife is actually his. Lucky him. Very cool. It was actually forged by the guy who was teaching the forging course, Sam Ritter. So look up, I think it's sam.j.ritter or Sam Ritter or something like that on Instagram. He just makes amazing stuff. I got one of his carving axes. Such beautiful work. Hand forges all his stuff, and it's just amazing. But yeah, I almost bought that knife, but got pipped at the post with that one. Okay, so EU obviously, pretty worried about that gas shortage. Poland, what's happening in Poland? Poland plans to create the strongest NATO ground forces in Europe. So the Polish Minister of National Defense, Bliskas, don't, please, if you speak Polish, can you please correct me on that? I'm not sure. It's probably like Bliskas. Said that his country intends to create the strongest land force among European NATO countries, which is super interesting. I mean, not surprising. Poland's right smack up against Ukraine. Poland's been invaded. Just look back in your pretty recent history. Poland's been punched around a little bit. So it doesn't surprise me that Poland wants to build up a big force. What does surprise me, what should surprise people, is that arguably the most powerful and the richest country in the EU, being Germany, has kind of per capita, or for the weight that it should bear, one of the most pathetic armies in NATO. It's really interesting. They're trying to change that now. They've obviously pumped a whole heap of money into their military this year. They've just signed off on a bill where I can't remember, they're increasing it by 2/3 or something like that, the spending this year alone, and then they're going to increase it over the next couple of years. But it's kind of surprising to me, thinking that the ability of Germany, the amount of money that it has, and the technical ability it has to actually manufacture goods that could be used for military purposes, they should probably have a bigger army than they do, but they don't. But Poland is stepping into that and they want to ramp this up. I mean, I look at the news like this and I go, yep, this is just another sign that clearly we're heading into a huge clash here within Europe, and Europe is it's like busting at the seams at the moment, is from my outside perspective. Feel free to argue with me on that if you happen to be from Europe and you think differently. But this here is another story that shows me that the EU is not the united front that people think it is when you're looking from the outside. Serbia, Kosovo. So it looks like there might be something about to happen here again. For those of you who may have lived through this era in the 90s, this was a huge war. This was actually a huge fuck up from the UN, basically. This was a absolute schmozzle of a conflict that happened in this area of Europe. And for some reason, we don't really look at this in history. We don't really talk about it that much, but it is a massive, massive conflict that happened right in the pretty much the smack bang sort of middle south of Europe. But it looks like it might kick off again. So there's been some strong words. There's been some moving around of forces. There's been some smaller conflicts, but it looks like the tensions are increasing and NATO is thinking about stepping in. I don't know what the sort of meta understanding of this one is, what's actually going on here. I'm waiting to see what falls out here. Is this just a convenient excuse for NATO to move forces around and start to slide more forces around? I don't think they really need an excuse to do that. But this could potentially be devastating for NATO, as they will be now distracted within their own borders, with a conflict that's happening within their own borders, no longer against this Eastern Front, against the great threat that is Russia. So this is really interesting stuff. I'm going to keep my eye on this Serbian Kosovo conflict here. And really, this is something that was never resolved in the first place. There was never a resolution that was final. I mean, when I was growing up, there was still a place called Yugoslavia, and that has separated and broken out at least 3 times into different countries and reformed, I can think of, since the 90s, so in the last sort of 20 years. This entire area here is still in a state of molten flux. We don't know how this is going to work out, but this could kick up. Like I said, there's increasing violence. There is increasing ability for countries to sort of like go, no, now's our time to do this, or people to rise up and go, now's our time. And I think this is what we'll see more of, is actually fracturing of nation states, of previous treaties, of contested or conflicted areas, or just areas that it wasn't like pinned down and somebody could draw a line around that map. You go and look at this area, I'm pretty sure it still is this way. It was for a little while. If you go and look at this area in Europe on Google Maps, you'll see a lot of dotted lines. Not those thick lines that say this is this side, this is this country, and this is this country. You'll see a lot of those dotted lines that kind of say, maybe this is part of theirs or part of theirs. We don't really know. Kind of like the Kashmir region between Pakistan and India. All right, let's. Oh, I missed this one. This was over in the Middle East area again. Beirut. So this is an interesting one to do with food supply. So in 2020, there was a huge explosion in Beirut. I'm sure you've seen the video of it. If you haven't, go look up Beirut explosion 2020. It is amazing. It is essentially, when we're talking about explosives, there's a type of explosive that you can actually make with fertilizer. So ammonium nitrate. You can mix ammonium nitrate with certain things, but ammonium nitrate by itself can actually create an explosion, given the right conditions. And that's apparently what happened with these conditions. They had tons and tons of ammonium nitrate stored up in a warehouse on the docks in Beirut. Somebody left it there. The conditions got right or wrong, I guess, for it. And it went up. It exploded. It was a huge explosion, caused a lot of damage. Was it 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate went up. That blast obviously damaged a lot of buildings around it. Well, we just found out that there was a collapse yesterday in Beirut of a building around that area. What was it containing? Grain silos. What a coincidence right now, when we just keep getting smashed. When we get smashed with all these food crises, all these problems with our food. Oh, right now, something that happened 2 years ago now has an effect on another food supply or food supply chain. It's just really interesting stuff that these things keep happening. All right, let's jump down to South America now. Peru, we're still seeing riots throughout Peru. So Peru has a government which is left-leaning government, I'm pretty sure. A lot of supporters for this government, or for this individual in particular. So President Pedro Castillo. A lot of ardent support for this person, but then there's a lot of corruption reports about this person as well. So there's investigations into corruption, which is totally unsurprising, really, at this day and age. Oh, what, a politician is corrupt? Oh, what a shock! So you've got people who definitely want this person out there. They're very anti the president at the moment. So they're there on the streets. He's set to give an address, or was giving an address. So you have these two forces coming out, pro Castillo. So they're there on the streets. He's set to give an address, or was giving an address. So you have these two forces coming out, pro Castillo or Castillo. I'm going to say Castillo. I'm pretty sure double L's in Spanish are y, like a Y. Castillo, pro, against, anti, clashing, big problems there in Peru. More rioting. I keep talking about this. Riots, protests, these sorts of things. It's something that's going to increase happening in the world. Let's slide south a little bit down into Argentina, because the same thing is happening down there. So Argentina, for those who don't know, are struggling with inflation much more than us. They're at 60% now. So their inflation's soared over 60%. Apparently 43% of adults have jobs. So there's a huge unemployment rate there. And reports coming out that they're actually refusing to work. So the headline of this story was Argentina's government collapsing. People refuse to work amid major subsidy cuts. So they're cutting their subsidies. They're saying, no, look, we got to wheel this back. The government realizes they're in a bad place, that they've been spending too much money on too much stuff, and they're going, no, let's hold this back. Not going to work. The people are hitting the streets. They're not working. They're going to start rioting. Inflation obviously through the roof. It's going to exacerbate the situation. Hungry people make angry people. I've said this many, many times before. But yeah, riots, demonstrations is something we're going to need to look out for in the future, because it's going to become more and more frequent. We're heading into a more violent period in the world. You can mark my words on that. Or you can just look at the news right now and make up your own mind on that. All right. Let's jump to the US now. There's a couple of things from the US that I'll wrap up on. They're seeing more and more things behind lock and key. So more and more items within supermarkets getting locked up now. Things like deodorant, toothpaste, candy, dish detergent, soap, and aluminium foil. Or I guess if you're in the US, it's aluminum foil. These things are getting locked up now. We're going to see more and more things locked up. It's kind of a worrying trend. These supermarkets lock these things up because they're getting stolen. These things are getting stolen because they cost more. Does it really matter? Are you going to die without deodorant and toothpaste and candy, dish detergent? No. Like all these things, they're not life-saving sort of stuff. They're not the things we actually really need. But as we see this spread out, it will start getting into the things we need. When is it going to be apples locked up behind cages? When is it going to be armed guards at supermarkets letting one person in at a time with a list, and then they'll go and fetch the things and give them to you? That was a very doomsday sort of scenario there, but this is the sort of thing that I have seen in other countries, that I have actually been to and watched this sort of thing play out. And I know that that's the path that we're on at the moment. It's a long way away. And like I always say, Australia, we're very, very insulated down in Australia. Like I can't see this happening anytime soon. However, my time predictions have been horribly wrong before. So who knows? Beef prices are actually set to surge further in the US as farmers sell off or liquidate cattle herds, which is the exact opposite of what I said. I said, okay, they've had to liquidate a whole heap of their cattle because of the heat wave they're having. The cattle's dying anyway. They can't, the increase in prices of feed and water and things like this, access to water. They're going, right, we've got to get rid of this cattle right now. So they're flooding the market with cattle, yet the price is going up. So what's happening here is, what I think is happening here is the market is starting to factor in what's going to happen in 6 to 12 months' time. That they're going, we're going to have a shortage of beef then, so let's start to factor that in now. I mean, on top of this, we've also got, yes, this cattle was fed with increased cost of feed and things like that. So that's going to be factored in there. But already in a flooded market, beef prices are going to go up. Imagine what happens when we're having supply shortages of beef. Beef's going to skyrocket. Cue the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists bombarding me in the messages. It's all part of their plan. This is what they're doing. Yes, it is. We're going to be eating bugs and cockroach milk in no time. Not me, friend, not me. I mean, I eat bugs totally. From a survival perspective, bugs are fine. When you're out in the bush and you're starving hungry, you're going to crack open a log. You're going to fry open some grasshoppers and stuff like that. Crickets, not a problem with that. But I will continue eating meat. So, hey, Advisor 2021-9 20219. Hi. How you going? California announces plan to charge landowners for their own water. No, I don't like this at all. Now, this is actually something that is kind of in Australia as well, where they're starting to track who has dams on their property. And it's more from the perspective of firefighting, but definitely in 2019, they were really on top of this. We were coming into the fire season, which was obviously a horrific fire season, but they were also worried about where people were getting their water from and who had water. So a farmer goes out, scrapes up the earth, digs a big divot, it fills up with rainwater. Hey, guess what? That's not your water. That's not your water anymore. You can't keep that. That's ours. Or we're going to charge you for it, like what they're thinking about doing here in California. This is utter bullshit. Like, water? Really? You're going to take the water from us? Like, this is the sort of stuff that I'm like, okay, it's time. Start setting fires and get your guns, kids. It's happening. Cool. I hope things are well in Sydney. So, disturbing trends there. Speaking of water, massive floods in Kentucky at the moment. So, I always like to talk about these weather effects. I think they're serious and we need to really think about them and focus on them as a threat. They're a threat that can happen anywhere in the world, anytime. You need to prepare. If you're a prepper, you should be prepared for weather events, 100%. So death toll in the flood-stricken parts of eastern Kentucky climbed to at least 25. Will almost certainly get worse as there's a whole heap of people that are unaccounted for at the moment. So, obviously floods we've had in Australia recently been pretty devastating. This is something that you really need to plan for. You really need to think about what's your flood plan as well, or your just inclement weather effect plan. North Texas City is on the verge of running out of water as historic drought grips the region. This isn't. It's 50 days of water left. They've got 50 days at current levels of water left. So that's pretty disturbing. Pretty disturbing stuff. Because once that runs out, then I don't know what they're going to do. Going to have to start shipping it in from Kentucky, I guess. Yes, I will cut it there. So thank you very much for jumping on and listening to me again. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for all the messages and stuff that people are sending through. Love to hear what you guys are up to, how your preps are going, what's happening in the world, wherever you are. If you see something interesting or something that you think, hey, this is something that Stu might be interested in, please feel free to send it through to me. I always love to hear from you guys. Apart from that, I'm going to cut it there. So keep prepping, gang. As always, if you can get out in the garden, get out in the garden, start growing your own food. Start doing all this sort of stuff. Start collecting your own water. Start thinking about what can I do if I'm not getting the extrinsic inputs that the government allows me to have. How can we live away from these people? They are not good people. We need to think about looking after ourselves, becoming more self-reliant human beings and helping each other out, helping inspire each other, helping give the information that, that we can all utilize in order to live better lives that aren't connected to this system, because this system is starting to show cracks. And if those cracks keep getting bigger, we're going to be without this system very soon. Ground solid ice here, says Peter Ruse, PhD. Interesting. All right, gang, that's it. So thank you again for joining me. Until next time, keep prepping, keep your eyes open out in the world, and Semper Paratus.